In 1971, after Wozniak began attending University of California, Berkeley, Jobs would visit him there a few times a week. This experience led him to study in nearby Stanford University's Student Union. Jobs also decided that rather than join the electronics club, he would put on light shows with a friend for Homestead's avant-garde jazz program. He was described by a Homestead classmate as kind of a brain and kind of a hippie, but he never fit into either group. He was smart enough to be a nerd, but wasn't nerdy. And he was too intellectual for the hippies who just wanted to get wasted all the time. He was kind of an outsider. In high school, everything revolved around what group you were in. And if you weren't in a carefully defined group, you weren't anybody. He was an individual in a world where individuality was suspect. By his senior year, in late 1971, he was taking freshman English class at Stanford and working on Homestead's underground film project with Chrisann Brennan. Yeah, Chrisann Brennan is his first girlfriend. Okay, so in 1971, so listen carefully. In 1971, after Wozniak began attending University of California, Berkeley ឈ្មោះសាកលវិទ្យាល័យនៅ California ឈ្មោះ Berkeley ប្រយ័ត្នប្រយែងឈ្មោះ Berkeley អានឲ្យត្រូវអានតាម research Berkeley. Shaw would visit him there a few times a week. This experience led him to study in nearby Stanford University Student Union. Job also decided that rather than join the electronics club, he would put on light shows with a friend for Homestead's avant-garde jazz program. He was described by a Homestead classmate, kind of a brain and kind of a hippie. ពួក hippie ដែលលើពួក hippie មេដែលលើពួក hippie
ដូចជាធ្លាប់ពួកតន្ត្រីហ្នឹងហើយ
ដូចពួកតន្ត្រីអញ្ចឹងណាប៉ុន្តែពួកហ្នឹងល្បីពួកតន្ត្រីហើយពួក clip គេហៅថាពួកតន្ត្រីសម័យវាដូច clip ណា
ហ្នឹងហើយ
hippie ហ្នឹងគឺសំដៅដល់ពួកអស់ហ្នឹងពួកតន្ត្រីល្បី but they never fit into either group. either in how you are either an either group. He was smart enough to be a nerd, smart to be a nerd, but wasn't nerdy. Biết là mùi nerd, nerdy. And he was too intellectual, intellectual, intellectual for the hippies who just wanted to get wasted. West mean eating like wasted all the time. He was kind and of an outsider. In high school, everything revolved around what group you were in. And if you weren't in a carefully defined, if you weren't, you weren't in a carefully defined group, you weren't anybody. He was an individual. He was an individual in a world where individuality was a suspect. By his senior year in late 1971, he was taking freshman English class at Stanford and working on a Homestead underground film project with Christian Brennan. Okay, union. Repeat after me. Union.
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 Rather than.
Rather than.
Rather than.
Rather than.
I want God.
I want God.
I want God.
God.
I want God.
Yeah. Describe.
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 Yeah, describe.
Describe.
Hippie.
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 Either.
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 Mày nhớ ngay công thức either. Either.
Either.
Nerd.
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 Nerdy.
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 Intellectual.
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 Yeah, intellectual. Wasted.
Intellectual. Wasted.
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 Revolved.
Revolve.
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 Burned.
Burnt.
One.
Weren't.
Mình đang mơ câu này. Defined.
Defined.
Define.
Defined.
Individual.
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 Individuality.
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 Freshman.
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 Underground.
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 Berkeley.
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 Experience.
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 Okay. Đó. Chấm. Dương xa án ích mấy. Án mà chop tầng óc. Án ta to nó nè. So là highlight nữa. Tam chua nó. Until the end. Underground. Until underground.
Berkeley. Experience. Union.
Experience.
Ê, cái cho.
Experience.
Experience. Union. Rather.
Rather than.
Rather than. Avant-garde. Describe. Hippie. Either. Nerd. Nerdy. Intellectual. Wasted. Revolt. Burn. Defined. Individual. Individuality. Freshman. Underground. That's all.
Yeah. Meaning.
Berkeley. Experience. Union. Rather than. Avant-garde. Describe. Hippie. Nerd. Nerdy. Intellectual. Wasted. Revolt. One. Define. Individuality. Freshman. Underground.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay.
Berkeley. Experience. Union. Rather than. Avant-garde. Describe.
Describe.
Describe. Hippie. Nerdy. Intellectual. Wasted. Revolt. Was. Defined. Individuality. Freshman. Underground.
Yeah. Okay, good. Dương chập đàm án bảo viết rất là ní kita dương thời án chụp mau chừng này nó University of California, Berkeley. This experience led him. Highlight the knee. Okay, and this experience led him. Student union. Rather than join the electronics club. Homestead's avant-garde jazz program. Described by a Homestead classmate. kind of a hippie
ឈើ
Yeah.
អាកន្លែងចិត្ត program ហ្នឹងអានថាម៉េចចាមែន
jazz
Jazz
តន្ត្រីសាក់តន្ត្រីសាក់បងចេះរាំតែ jazz ហ៎ដែលលឺក្នុងបញ្ញត្តិជាងឯងអេអស់ចាអាដែលលឺបងនោះអត់ពួកយើងបានស្អីណាបត់ស្អីណាអីទៅហោះទៅណានេះបាត់ either group I'm a nerd enough to be a nerd yeah wasn't nerdy too intellectual he was too intellectual to get west all the time to get west all the time in high school everything's
ឈើហ្នឹង
revolve
basic
កំតនបក revolve around what group you were in if you weren't carefully defined J. Anson he was an individual where individuality he was taking a freshman English class at Homestead Underground yeah okay it mean
ឈើ
yeah
អាពាក្យនេះពាក្យvested ហ្នឹងមិនឆ្លៃអានតែ vest អាហ្នឹង vested ក៏ vest
wasted មាន ed នេះ ed នេះមិនចេញ short it wasted
មិនឆ្លៃអានអត់ d
វាធម្មតាវាអានតែ west ទេតែដល់ពេលវាមាន ed យើងត្រូវអាន wasted តោះអីមែន University of California Berkeley
អានអសផង
yeah repeat after me just repeat after me you and then mấy niên and then Huy A yep University of California Berkeley
University of California Berkeley
mấy niên
flick បើកឆើអាន flick បើក University of California Berkeley
nhà nó không tới nhì tới nhà California Berkeley read again many
University of California Berkeley
in
University of California Berkeley
Berkeley this experience led him
This experience led him
The experience led him
This experience led him
mấy niên ấy ai này ọt chanh ai này ọt chanh tầm pi mấy niên read again this experience led him
This experience led him
yeah student union
Student Union
Student unions
rather than join the electronics club
rather than join the electronics club
rather than join the electronics club
rather than join this electronics club
yeah the na Homestead's avant-garde jazz program
Homestead's avant-garde jazz program
Homestead avant-garde jazz program.
Homestead avant-garde jazz program.
Described by a Homestead classmate.
Described by a Homestead classmate.
Niệm.
Described by a Homestead classmate.
Described by a Homestead classmate.
Kind of a hippie.
Kind of a hippie.
Kind of a hippie.
Kind of a hippie.
Either group.
Inner group.
Either group.
Either group.
Enough to be a nerd.
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 Was a nerdy.
Was a nerdy.
Was a nerdy.
Was a nerdy.
He was too intellectual.
He was too intellectual.
He was too intellectual.
He was too intellect. Ôi chết. Sure.
He was too intellectual.
He was too intellectual.
Yeah. To get wasted all the time.
To get vested all the time.
To get wasted all the time.
To get wasted all the time.
Revolve around what group you were in.
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 If you weren't,
If you weren't.
If you weren't.
If you weren't.
carefully defined.
Carefully defined.
Carefully defined.
Carefully defined.
He was an individual.
He was an individual.
He was an individual.
He was an individual.
Where individuality.
Where individuality.
Where individuality.
Where individuality.
He was taking freshman English class.
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 A homestead underground.
A homestead underground.
A homestead underground.
Yes.
A homestead underground.
Yes. Good. ហាអញ្ចឹងពាក្យប៉ុណ្ណឹងយើងត្រូវសល់ប្រមាណគឺជារបស់យើងហើយយើងត្រូវយកទៅហាត់អានហើយ voice មកឲ្យ teacher. Your homework is to voice. មុននឹង voice
បកថៃណាអើយ
អត់បកអត់បកអត់តាន់បកថ្ងៃហ្នឹងថ្ងៃច័ន្ទមិនយើងបកប៉ុន្តែ before you read and voice to me you have to read it 100 times, right?
អុយឈើណាខាត់តែ
Bên anh chơi dùng An tập nhạc không?
ញ៉ាំមុនគេខុសមុនគេត្រូវមកមុនគេហ្នឹងហើយអូ
ឈើ
ខេ
អានintellect អីគេនឹងតិចមកឈើ
intellectual
អូខ្ញុំអត់ចេះកាញ់ហងនឹង
intellectual
intellectual
Chua tự ốc hả?
chual intellectual
ឥឡូវហ្នឹងវាកំពុងក៏អានមួយគ្នាអត់បានហើយបើអានតែឯងបាន
intellectual អូខេ
intellectual
អានដូចអ្នកចេះណាកុំអានដូចអ្នកអត់ចេះផ្ញើមក teacher ណាអានដូចអ្នកចេះ
Chơi xong thư
Thôi cho biết
Yeah
respect
បាទ
អាពាក្យបន្ទាប់ពី individuality
Yes suspect ពួក suspect ហ្នឹងឲ្យបានដាក់មែន suspect Yeah suspect Yeah suspect Yeah suspect ក៏ពាក្យបាក់ដែរ suspect
ពាក្យមួយទៀតឆ្លើ
ពាក្យមួយទៀត
ចាជួយអានអាពាក្យនេះ គេ describe នេះខ្ញុំអានអត់ចេះត្រូវចេះតែភ្លេច
describe
ក្រៅ
ក្រាយ describe
ចាអា B ហ្នឹងអត់មានបើទៀត
បាទ describe ពួកយើងអត់ដឹងលើទៅឆាអាននេះគ្រប់កន្លែង ed នេះទៅឆាបញ្ចេញខ្យល់ទាំងអស់គ្រាន់តែពួកយើងអត់ចាប់អារម្មណ៍
ហ្នឹងឯងឆា revolt ហ្នឹងអានទៀតមើល
revolt
revolt
revolt អានេះក៏ចេញដឺដែរនេះ defined yeah nerd គ្រប់ពាក្យរបស់ទៅចាអានគឺមានបញ្ចេញសម្លេងកតុយទាំងអស់ហើយយើងតែហាត់អាន fun គឺបាទ
ជួរទី2រាប់ពីក្រុមឡើងលើអាឡែង Stanford អាហ្នឹង Stanford
Stanford
Ford
yeah Ford Lanford Stanford
អាហ្នឹងអត់បកភេណា